What did it mean to be a child when society saw you more as a burden than a person? In the 1800s, the line between innocence and survival was razor thin. Some were forced into dangerous jobs, others endured punishments considered moral lessons, and far too many never had a chance to grow up at all. In this video, we're counting down 10 of the cruelest realities of childhood during that century. Realities that reveal more about society's values than about the children themselves. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Number 1. Child labor in factories. Imagine a child standing on tiptoe to reach a spinning frame, assigned to work not for hours, but for entire days. 12 to 16 hours inside a factory hall meant no daylight, only gears, lint, and smoke. Families depended on these small workers to add pennies to household income, and factory owners depended on them to keep production moving. Children acted as piecers, leaning dangerously to repair thread, or scavengers, crawling under working machines to collect dropped cotton. Fingers, arms, and lives were often caught in the process. This exploitation became key to industrial growth, fueling mills and profits, while reducing children to replaceable parts of progress. By the 1830s, nearly half of textile workers were minors, giving industry its speed at the cost of youth. Reform came only after countless accidents, leaving factories lined with the silence of lost childhoods. Number 2. Coal mine breaker boys. Picture a boy crouched over a chute, the air thick with black dust that coated his teeth and lungs. These were breaker boys, children sorted above the mines, picking slate from raw coal for hours at a stretch. Their pay was only pennies, but their exhaustion was priceless to the mine owners. Every shift carried danger. If fingers slipped beneath the moving coal, they could be crushed in an instant. Collapsing timbers, sudden explosions, and the steady poison of coal dust made their world one of constant peril. A missed stone in the pile often brought the sting of a supervisor's blow. Coal powered cities, factories, and homes, yet it consumed young lives to keep the lamps burning. Many never saw adulthood, and only after grim reports surfaced did reform begin. Coal lit Victorian parlors while quietly extinguishing childhood itself. Number 3. Chimney sweeps. They earned the name climbers, small children forced into work inside soot-clogged chimneys. Many were sold by desperate families to master sweeps, entering a trade that promised no escape. Their frames were perfect for narrow flues, but the dangers pressed in at every step. A slip could mean suffocation as loose soot sealed off the air. Burns from still-hot bricks scarred young skin, while repeated exposure led to respiratory sickness and cancers developing before their voices even changed. Bound to their masters, these children lived not as apprentices but as property, punished if they slowed, beaten if they resisted. Mid-century laws finally restricted the practice. Yet enforcement was weak, and many masters clung to profit. The chimney became a tomb for countless youths. Each body treated as a tool, traded, used up, and discarded in the name of comfort. Number 4. Workhouses for orphans. For thousands of orphans, the walls of the workhouse promised shelter yet felt more like stone bars. These institutions claimed to provide care, but daily life was marked by hunger, endless chores, and watchful overseers. Children worked in textile rooms where the air choked with fibers, in laundries heavy with steam, or at mindless tasks meant only to instill discipline. Education was sparse, often replaced with routines that drained spirit and reinforced obedience. Affection was absent. Instead, orphans were reminded of their place, carrying a stigma they could never shake. The workhouse stood as a symbol of policy built on thrift rather than mercy. Poverty was treated as failure, and childhood itself reduced to cost. The law even marked them with the term pauper children, denying them the dignity of citizens and the comfort of belonging. Number 5. High child mortality. In many towns, half of all infants never reached the age of 5. Childhood was fragile, and families lived with the shadow of loss always nearby. Scarlet fever, diphtheria, and tuberculosis stalked every crowded street. Poor water supplies spread infections, while cramped living spaces allowed illness to move quickly from one child to the next. Hospitals, lacking proper sanitation, often deepened risk rather than brought relief. A trip for treatment could leave families with another grave to tend. Out of this constant sorrow grew rituals of mourning. Families sat for post-mortem photographs, holding still beside the small bodies of children, creating keepsakes in place of futures. Grief wove itself into everyday life, from black ribbons to somber portraits lining household walls. Over time, these steady losses pushed society toward early public health reforms, as survival itself demanded cleaner streets, safer water, and healthier homes. Number 6. Street urchins and beggars. In the crowded city streets, children without families or steady homes filled the alleys and markets. They weren't seen as children at all, but as nuisances disrupting order. Passers-by stepped around them, giving quick glances but little help. To survive, many begged for scraps, performed tricks for coins, or slipped into theft when hunger grew too sharp. Police often chased them away, while wealthy citizens treated them as blemishes on an otherwise modern city. These youngsters, nicknamed urchins, became symbols of urban decay. Society judged them as corrupt or lazy, rather than as victims of poverty and neglect. Stories and illustrations painted them as cunning and dangerous, hardening public opinion. These images justified harsh laws instead of compassion. Only later did reformers begin pushing for change, arguing that these children could be raised into citizens, not cast out as criminals. Number 7. Corporal punishment in schools. School in the 1800s often looked less like a classroom and more like a stage of fear. Lessons unfolded under the watch of teachers who carried canes, straps, or rulers as tools of order. Pain was believed to sharpen memory and build moral strength. The day began with prayer, reminding students that every action was not only judged by their teacher but also by God. Silence, posture, and obedience mattered as much as arithmetic. Literature reinforced this harsh rhythm, filled with tales where children who disobeyed met with punishment, while dutiful characters thrived. The book itself became another weapon of instruction. Obedience was the goal, and violence was the method. Many adults of the period viewed such acts not as cruelty, but as preparation for citizenship. This climate of discipline carved an authoritarian pattern that echoed through generations. Number 8. Child soldiers and drum boys. War reached even the youngest, pulling children into armies as attendants and musicians. Drum boys marched alongside soldiers, their rhythm guiding troops in battle. But these children stood in the same smoke and musket fire as men twice their size. Carrying a drum meant carrying a target. They faced stray bullets, blasts from cannons, and the chaos of advancing lines. Adults sometimes treated them as mascots, figures of inspiration meant to lift morale. Yet the danger they endured was no less real. Many never returned, and those who did often carried scars both seen and hidden. Governments presented their presence as patriotic, a sign of loyalty and sacrifice. In truth, innocence was turned into propaganda, and expendable lives were shaped into symbols. War absorbed children not just into its ranks, but into its graveyards and its myths. Number 9. Medical experiments on children. In the 1800s, medicine moved forward without oversight, and children often paid the price. Their bodies became tools for experiments, treated as material for trial and error in a time before regulation. Orphans in particular were seen as available subjects. Doctors tested new vaccines, attempted surgeries, or tried unfamiliar treatments on them. Pain relief was crude at best, and many endured operations with little more than restraint. Drugs of uncertain strength were given, and when they failed, children bore the consequences. The hope of cures often outweighed concern for the most vulnerable. Advancement in science came, but it carried a human toll. Many young lives vanished in silence, marked only by the progress of medicine itself. Society claimed it was working to save children, yet too often, it sacrificed them in the name of discovery. Number 10. Prostitution and exploitation. Poverty pushed some children into the darkest corners of Victorian life, where the streets offered no safety and predators saw opportunity. For many, survival meant exploitation under systems that traded their youth for profit. Networks of traffickers supplied brothels with boys and girls, trapping them in cycles of abuse with almost no protection. Once inside, Escape was rare, and the victims often faced blame instead of sympathy. Class prejudice turned their suffering into a supposed moral failing, treating those exploited as if they were responsible for their own plight. Occasional scandals shocked newspapers and stirred outrage, but justice arrived slowly, if at all. These hidden abuses revealed the era's deep hypocrisy, a society that preached morality while living on exploitation. Yet from this cruelty grew the earliest child protection laws, fragile beginnings of a movement to defend those once discarded. The 1800s exposed a harsh truth. Childhood was rarely protected. Many were treated as labor, tools of profit, or burdens to be managed rather than human beings with needs and rights. Survival weighed heavier than nurture, and cruelty often passed for discipline. From these ordeals, change slowly emerged. The rights children hold today, education, safety, protection, were shaped out of suffering that demanded reform. Yet history offers a warning. Safeguards can never be taken for granted. Children remain vulnerable when society grows careless, and their welfare, once overlooked, stays secure only with constant attention and deliberate protection. Be sure to subscribe